Meeting of June 9th and our budget hearings. And I think we are going to do roll call first. Kaylee?
Thank you, Chair. Supervisor Arroyo?
Here.
Supervisor Madrone?
Present.
Supervisor Bohn?
Yep.
Supervisor Wilson?
Here.
Chair Bushnell?
Yes.
All are here.
Okay, if we could salute our flag, please. CAO Hayes, are there any modifications to the agenda?
Good afternoon, Chair Bushnell. There's no modifications today.
Okay. We will go right into public comment on non-agenda items, and we'll go to the Zoom first.
There is none, Chair.
Is there any public comment on non-agenda items in the room? Nope. So I'm going to close public comment on non-agenda items. And we're going to go to H, which is our public hearing. And I have a little thing here. So we're going to go first to the County Administrative Officer, Alicia Hayes.
Thank you, Chair Bushnell. Before your board today is the public hearings on the proposed county budget and special district budgets for fiscal year 25-26. This is the second step to your board adopting the budget, which will take place on June 24th, and Deputy CAO Jessica Maceo will present to you today.
Okay, I think I have to open the public hearing on the proposed county budget and special district budgets for fiscal year 25-26, right?
Chair, first you'll want to convene as the board
yeah.
of directors for the special districts.
Okay, we're going to convene as whatever. We're going to convene and we're going to be the board for the special districts. And then we're going to open the public hearing and then we're going to go to Jessica Maceo.
And Kaylee, do you mind bringing up my presentation? I'm just going to skip along to the special district slide here. The auditor controller prepares the annual budgets for the special districts governed by the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors pursuant to Chapter 1 of Division 3 of Title 3 of the California Government Code. The California Government Code requires each special district to adopt a balanced budget on an annual basis and hold a public hearing. They are presented with the attached proposed fiscal year 25-26 budget or county budget. We do have one modification for your board to consider. Fund 3970, County Service Area number 4 was inadvertently missed in the proposed budget, so staff seek direction from your board today to change the budget for 3970. You'll see that there is a budget in there in the proposed budget on the slide. That was just a placeholder that our budget software put in there. So the budget that we would recommend would be $212,500 in revenue, an increase over the amount there of $1,720, and increasing the expenditures to $200,000. The expenditures in this budget are for fire services for CSA 4. And should your board approve this, this will bring the total special district budgets to $1,996,972, an increase of $63,473 over the prior year. And this increase is primarily attributed to an increase in expenditures for the Lolita Fire Protection District. And with that, I'll turn it back over.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board? Supervisor Bohn.
What are the balances on, we don't have the balances up there in those districts, or do we, or do you slide it over?
I do not have the fund balances. I could bring that back if your board wanted
No,
to hold off.
it caught me off guard first because I know a couple of lighting districts are asking for lighting and I'd got balances and they were pretty healthy. So we should probably follow through with their lighting requests. So I will follow up on that. Sorry, I saw the parentheses in the 30 and I said, whoa, how the hell did that happen? But anyway, understood. Thanks.
Through the chair, the lighting districts do have pretty healthy fund balances, and we do report the fund balances on the state budget schedules when we finalize them in November.
And most of those are, and I'm just digressing a little bit. A lot of the lighting districts are run by CSDs, who are also managed by by volunteers. So if they're, and I know we're stretched thin, but if there's any way we could work with them and PG&E to help them with that, nothing beats crime than lights, as we all know. So thanks.
Supervisor Bohn, the CSDs are managed by volunteer boards. Sometimes they have executive directors. Is that true?
Some do, and some are very limited. I
Yeah.
mean, like the ones you have and stuff, they get 10 hours a week or
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah.
I don't imagine lights are what they're worried about. I'm just saying, if we can help them in any way in those places that could use some lights where people tend to park in our rural areas, and I'm
Okay.
thinking a lot of these are rural areas, if we can help them out, and especially if we could put them on existing utility poles already, the costs go down greatly. So,
Okay.
thanks.
Jessica?
Is that a formal direction for staff to follow up on?
Kinda, because it would be nice, because I'm sure go ahead.
Supervisor Bohn, would you just yes or no for Jessica? So I think that
Yes.
would be helpful. Okay. And then Supervisor Arroyo.
I was just going to express interest as well in getting those understanding what the balances are and what the what their approach is with utilization of them. That sounds great.
Thank you. I know, like Garberville CSD, they are, their board is a nonprofit or volunteers, but their staff is not, and so they have availability, to request. That's why I was kind of trying to clarify it just a little bit.
And for those paid areas, direct them if there's anything, and they can do the paperwork. I'm just saying, and I know some don't. Some have one person working part-time because they have 225 customers or 150 customers, so.
Any other questions from the board on the special districts? Seeing none, I will, Jessica, do you have anything else to add? And so I believe that I have to receive public comment on this item, the special districts, and so we'll go to Zoom first,
There is none, Chair.
and we will go into the room. Are there any public comments on this item? Okay, I'm going to close public comment, and I'm going to close the public hearing on the special districts. And then I'm looking for a motion. Supervisor Arroyo.
I will make the motion, but I just wanted to make sure that Jessica, did you have the information you needed or the guidance about what to bring back?
I think what I have is for staff to work with the CSDs to look into adding lighting in the various lighting districts and bring
as-
something back to your board.
Additionally, we need to include the one item that was left out. Is that correct?
Yes, and include in the motion to make the proper adjustments to Fund 3970
All right, so moved.
and set the date of adoption as June 24th.
Still so moved.
Second.
I want to make sure that Kaylee has that. Please, if you have any clarifying questions, ask.
I just want to clarify that the motion included making proper adjustments to 3970 and to bring back adoption on 624 for the special districts.
And did you get that staff is going to bring back information on the special lighting districts? Correct.
No, I didn't. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Kaylee.
Do you need to do roll call?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Supervisor Bohn? Yep. Supervisor Bushnell?
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Arroyo,
Yes.
Supervisor Madrone.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, thank you. So we will now adjourn and reconvene as the Board of Supervisors. And I will open the public hearing, and we are going to receive a presentation on the County of Humboldt state and federal legislative programs, and I believe we're going to Deputy Quincy.
Good afternoon, Chair Bushnell, members of the newly reformed Board of Supervisors. Appreciate that. Sean Quincy, Deputy CAO at the County Administrative Office. Today we're providing you, it's a little bit out of the norm for us to do this legislative update this way. We don't typically do it with budget hearings, but given the nature of everything that's been happening, we figured that it was important to provide a little bit of context as we consider the budget for the county for fiscal year 25-26. On the state level today, we'll hear from Karen Lang from Shaw Yoder and Tweed Schmelzer and Lang about legislation affecting our county. Currently, we're tracking 17 bills that we've supported this year, including, among others, bills that have to do with short-term rental information sharing, open meeting teleconferencing rules, and enhanced infrastructure financing district rules, among others. We're also monitoring issues we're opposed to, like AB 1331, that impose workplace surveillance limits, and AB 470, which would relieve AT&T of their carrier of last resort obligations. Additionally, we know that Assemblymember Rogers has submitted our offshore wind earmark request for inclusion into the state budget, and we're awaiting further information on that. At the federal level today, we have Paragon Government Relations that will brief us on major congressional developments, in particular the narrow House passage of the budget reconciliation bill that could significantly impact our safety net programs. We'll also discuss positive developments like the Secure Rural Schools extension. And on the budget front for on the federal level, Senator Schiff has expressed interest in our Trinidad Scenic Drive stabilization study request. Final federal budget request list from members of Congress are pending right now. We'll get further information from them shortly. These updates will help inform our ongoing advocacy and strategic planning efforts throughout the year. And with that, I'll turn it over to Karen Lang for our state legislative updates.
Great, thanks, Sean. Good afternoon, board members. Good to see all of you, even though you're about the size of a pen on my screen. Good to see you. I don't know that Sean could have timed this any more perfectly. You are getting very, very fresh information this afternoon. First, the budget agreement between the two houses has been released. It's not in written form, the actual details of the individual trailer bills and framework, but the summary of what the Assembly and the Senate have agreed to is available, and that just was released a little bit earlier today. So I have very fresh budget information that I'll walk through first. Just for the public's benefit, setting the context here, the legislature must send the governor a budget by June 15th. That's in the Constitution. If they don't send it by June 15th, they will not get paid, and that's quite motivating to members that are reliant on their paychecks for day-to-day living. So since that constitutional amendment was passed several years ago, the legislature sends something to the governor by June 15th. There's going to be the major spending bill, like the main budget bill, and then there's that just has sort of the departments and agencies and the number of dollars that goes to them. And then there's the baby budget bill, which sort of makes corrections to the larger budget. And then there are the individual, what are called trailer bills, and those are the policy bills that essentially effectuate the spending plan that went first. So what you'll probably see in the coming days is that the main budget bill will go to the governor on the 15th. Happy Father's Day to all of us for being here on Sunday, but I think that's how it's going to be. And then over the next 2 weeks after that, the trailer bills will be getting negotiated for the main part of the spending plan. There were several proposals that the governor did include in the May revision that are going to be punted until later in the summer, towards the end of session. Contextually, the revenue picture still is actually pretty good. The state is not in a free fall, which we were concerned about, but given the chaos at the federal level, We have pretty wild swings in our personal income tax and capital gains because there are so many incredibly wealthy people that live, especially in this Silicon Valley. So when they have a really good month on Wall Street, you can feel it and you can see it in the state budget. And to that end, there was a pretty wild swing in May on on the stock market, and at the end of the day, the amount of revenue that the state collected for the month of May was $700 million more than had been predicted just in the beginning of May. The governor's May revision had updated numbers, and the final count on that is $700 million more than they had predicted. And all of that was attributable to personal income tax. It was up 11.1% over what was projected. But however, the swings in the stock market really do greatly inform our revenue picture more than just the regular economy, just because of how our, the top 1% of earners contribute about 50% of the state's general fund amount that is attributable to personal income tax and capital gains. So when really wealthy people have really good days on Wall Street, the general fund benefits from that. So what they're trying to do at the state level with Department of Finance is plan a budget that incorporates those sort of swings and volatility into our spending plan so that we are not quickly running out of cash if something were to happen. So they're trying to bring in all those factors, which are hard to predict, and also trying to close what's identified as a $12 billion deficit based on what they knew at the time. When they put together the May revision, they estimated a $12 billion deficit. The tentative agreement, I'll just touch on some of the highlights. One of the big asks was around transit funding so that folks could continue to use public transit while operations are not necessarily keeping up with expenses. So your fare boxes are not covering the cost of operations. Initially, the ask was for around the transit funding piece from the transit agency statewide was about $2 billion. That is not included in the May revision or the budget agreement today. What is included is a $750 million loan authorization that will be made available to transit agencies that need it to shore up operational funding levels so that there are not cuts in service, which sort of would erode people's access to transit. Secondly, there was $1 billion ask for HAP, which is the homeless funding that has been pretty consistently going to counties and cities and COCs. The governor did not include any funding in the January budget or the May revision for HAP. The budget agreement that the legislature announced today has $500 million for HAP. It's half of what local governments wanted. It's better than nothing, but we'll see how the individual statewide associations kind of land there. There are no new tax increases proposed in the budget, so in case you were concerned there, there's no new tax increases. I would also highlight there are going to be the Senate in particular with Senator McGuire as the pro tem want to pursue a constitutional amendment that would revise our rainy day fund. For those of you that have been around long enough to recall, Governor Brown set up through a constitutional amendment a set-aside amount of money to get us through times like this where we were spending more than we had in the bank, and so we could draw on the reserves. And there's actually at this point 3 different reserves, but in the end they're all capped in a certain way. There's various reasons why people do or do not want to budget in a way that sets aside more money for days like today. But there's a cap on it, and the pro tem of the Senate wants to increase the cap of what could be set aside in there from 10% of the budget to 25% of the general fund budget, so that if we have a huge swing, there's even more money in order to capture those extra dollars without having to spend them. So it will increase the deposits there, and it will exempt them from the state appropriations limit. One of the things that came up the last time we had a really substantial amount of funding coming in with Governor Brown is that you can only spend more, like a certain percentage over the year before. It's the state appropriations limit, and after you spend to that amount, any other money that came in you need to return to the taxpayers. And there was distaste in some quarters to do that the last time we had the situation. So what the constitutional amendment will do would be to allow money that goes into the rainy day fund to not be counted against the appropriation limit so that we could save more. And depending on who you are and where you sit in the world, you may disagree with that and may want the money returned, but they are trying to insulate our budget from further swings. And then, of course, when we went into the weekend on Friday, there had been an announcement that there would be large-scale reductions coming from the federal government across all manner of grants, waiting to see what exactly that looks like, but certainly the legislature has to factor that in. And so when they move towards getting these budget bills into print, there's going to be, that negotiation with the governor to get to something by really June 30th, because the budget year starts July 1. But I think all of you should anticipate that the more significant changes at the federal level that occur related to Medi-Cal or any of the other programs that our state is incredibly reliant on, that will have a very big impact on our balanced state budget. The state of California cannot pass a budget that does not have revenues and expenditures matching. The federal government can do deficit spending and we cannot. So if there's a significant drop in federal funding, we will need to readjust our budget. And it's quite possible that there will be special sessions in the fall to make corrections to our budget if that's needed. It'll just, time will tell on that. I'm trying to think if I know that's a lot and I've been talking for a long time. The one other thing I want to touch on before I hand it back to Sean is there's two pieces in the resources area of the budget that would be of interest to your board. One is the cap and trade extension plan. It doesn't expire this year, but it does generate a significant amount of money that can fund various activities that the state wants to support to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The governor and leadership wanted to extend it this year because it provides some reliability of funding for certain programs into the future, including high-speed rail, and they're trying to make sure that a portion of it can fund CAL FIRE operations, which is a new idea. And so they were trying to incorporate it into the state budget, and some of the money was being programmed to fund programs that had been previously funded out of the general fund. So the cap and trade discussion, I think, will go beyond July 1. And similar, the Proposition 4 expenditures, which you certainly had a direct interest in. The county had an ask into the pro tem and your assembly members' offices to support funding for offshore wind and getting you some help funding staff positions to contend with all of the different ongoings, rulemakings, regulatory processes around that. It looks like the vast majority of the Prop 4 discussion will also be postponed to later in the summer. So all this to say, we may have a budget on July 1. We are going to be budgeting through the middle of September and potentially when they shut down for the regular session, and we may be back in October or November to do even more budgeting. So there's not really like a time to exhale and feel like the budget's done, let's go back to regular bills. But we should have some sort of budget on July 1, and then we'll have to keep tracking very closely the issues that are of greatest interest to the county. It'll go on for a while. And then just a couple bills I wanted to touch on. The carrier of last resort legislation, AB 470, that legislative vehicle, so the actual bill number 470, that got put into Assembly rules before the end of last week, which is the House of Origin deadline week. 470 may not move again this year, and much credit is owed to Assemblymember Rogers because the bill was in the Assembly, and it would have a very big impact on folks in your county that rely just on landline, copper, phone line service. RCRC, Assemblymember Rogers, they have just been doing a wonderful job representing areas that don't have regular access to broadband. That measure might not move forward. I don't think we're done talking about what AT&T wants to do relative to phone line service in the state of California. So if you look at the bill status and you're like, what's going on there? It got put in rules, sort of like the penalty box for bills, but be aware of that. I think with that, I'll stop talking and hand it back to Sean. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, are there any questions from the board? Supervisor Arroyo.
I haven't followed with this year's budget process what is happening with funds that have been previously awarded through grants but are now, but have not been expended. And I'm concerned about that. I think we probably all are. But on the state side, do you have any intel there? Has that been a substantive part of the discussion? I haven't been tracking that piece of it.
There's definitely a lot of worry about awards that were made that were not encumbered in county coffers under contract. I'm not aware of any state grants being pulled back yet. If it's federal, I would defer to Hassan and Joe and Tom about, the grants that could come back. I think that there's some of that that's going to go on, but I don't know that there's anything that the state has awarded that they would need to pull back. There's definitely reductions in expenditures for the going forward, and if there were programmatic pots of money that were approved in previous budgets that were undersubscribed, I think in a couple places those are being zeroed out and that money's reverting to the general fund. But I haven't heard yet, but again, you are the first Board of Supervisors I've talked to since the agreement was reached. I'm unaware of them trying to walk back anything that a county had factored in to a budget locally that was only state funding. But the federal piece is obviously a huge question mark.
Okay, we'll go back to Sean.
Sure. Thank you, Karen. And just as a final note, your board is well aware, but a lot of these bills have changed houses. So if it started in the Assembly, it's going over to the Senate and vice versa. And so we'll be doing work on the staff level to make sure that all of our statements of opposition or support translate over to the second house so that those committees can receive those bills. And so switching over to the federal side, I believe we have Tom Joseph from Paragon Government Relations to talk about some of those potential reductions in funding at the federal level that Karen referred to. Tom, I'll turn it over to you.
I'm actually going to steal Tom's thunder on this one, Sean, if you don't mind. I'll turn it over to Tom right after, I promise.
No sweat.
So, Hassan Sarsour, Paragon Government Relations. Yeah, I got Tom Joseph on with me as well as Joe Cron. Just give you an update on sort of the budget, where things stand, how we're looking. And we use the term budget pretty loosely. It could mean a few different things depending on the context. I'll sort of walk you through where we are at this point. So I guess I'll start with the most inconsequential. The President's FY26 budget proposal recently came out. I don't want to minimize the importance of the President's budget, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat that's been in charge. What we've seen recent years, it's widely panned. Nobody really pays it much attention, but it does sort of lay out the administration's goals and priorities for the upcoming year. So those quote-unquote skinny budget that came out earlier this year, a few more details have come out more recently, but suffice it to say that it proposes some pretty significant cuts on the domestic discretionary side of things, increases on the defense side as well. Again, pretty much dead on arrival on the Hill. Republicans, Democrats both think that the cuts go a little bit too far. Again, with the annual appropriations process, you do need bipartisan support to pass these bills. You're going to need 60 votes in the Senate to get this across. We often see these showdowns where it comes down to the last minute whether we're going to have a federal government shutdown, whether there is a continuing resolution, which is what we're under right now, or sometimes they do get the budget done on time. So in terms of timeline, the federal fiscal year starts October 1. I've been doing this for about 15 years. I've never seen them hit that target. Usually you're lucky if you get a budget by the end of the year for the upcoming fiscal year. So they have started that process. Once the President's budget comes out, then they start talking about appropriations. There are 12 appropriations bills. It goes through committee. All of the federal department heads have been making their way through Capitol Hill. They've done their budget hearings, defended the President's budget, taken questions, and now they're sort of getting into the meat of the appropriations season. And this is for basically funding for fiscal year 2026, again, which starts October 1. These are discretionary programs, so not your mandatory side. So we're not talking Medicare, we're not talking Medicaid, we're not talking SNAP, not yet at least. But that's sort of where we are right now. They've, again, started the process. That'll continue on through the summer, and then we'll have a better idea about where they're going with the federal budget there. The big one we want to talk about is the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or One Big Ugly Bill, depending on who you ask. This is the budget reconciliation discussion, what we've been hearing for the last few months. This is the one that would impact some of those mandatory spending programs. So again, your Medicare, or your Medicaid, sorry, your SNAP, programs like that. I'll turn it over to Tom in a second to discuss some of the specifics and how that could impact the budget. But just want to also add, again, this is a very large package. It's got a number of the president's priorities in there. It would extend the Trump-era tax cuts for a long period of time. It would preserve the tax-exempt status of municipal bonds. That was one that was on the table, often used to finance infrastructure projects. So we were glad that was, they didn't touch that. Good on that front. And then I know Sean in his opening remarks mentioned Secure Rural Schools. It does include a 3-year extension of Secure Rural Schools program. That program is currently expired. And what happens when it expires is that it reverts to an old formula based off of timber receipts. So to give you an idea how that impacts your budget, based on timber receipts, Humboldt County is receiving $55,000 this year instead of the $1.1 million you should be getting. So if this does go through, you will be receiving that additional funding. But there is, again, a lot of bad stuff in there, things that will impact the county budget on Medicaid and SNAP. And then Tom, I'll turn it over to you. Tom's a lot smarter than me. He knows the specifics. Take it away, Tom.
Actually, you know what, Hassan, I'm going to also steal Tom's thunder. You can see a theme here today.
We are going to let Tom talk eventually.
No respect for their elders.
We don't have respect for. I don't mean to do it. One little budget thing. I did text Tom privately, folks, and say, hey, I'm going to jump in here real quick. I just to make it a unified discussion, as long as we're on the budget and appropriations process, want to mention something, and then again, we'll get to Tom, who is the main event, because since budget reconciliation is the main event. I did want to note, as part of the, of course, appropriations process, as I think the board members are aware, the last now, 5 years, Congress has brought so-called earmarks back. So these are community project funds. That's what they call them in the House. Congressionally directed spending items is what they call them in the Senate. I did want to note some breaking news. Senator Schiff has requested 2 projects through the FY26 Transportation HUD appropriations bill. He is requesting $8.82 million for the Garberville Complete Streets project. He's also requesting $800,000 for Scenic Drive to study that project further. And so want to note those were 2 priorities that your board put in for the fiscal year 2026 appropriation cycle. I want to underscore these are requests that have been made by Senator Schiff. It is not a guarantee of funding. The next step in the process, and again, when Hassan was talking about the appropriations process kicking off, that's happened in the House. It hasn't really officially kicked off in the Senate, other than some of these members releasing their earmarks. But what we'll need is for the Senate Appropriations Committee ultimately to fund those projects. But at this point in time, you're in the game. Those requests have been made, so it's a positive development. I would also note that Congressman Huffman has requested, as he did last year, but there weren't earmarks last year, $153,000 for the Sheriff's Department for some computer and technology upgrades. So that's another pending earmark that's in the process. So that's it for now on budget and appropriations, unless you have questions later on, which we're happy to answer. But now on to Tom. So sorry, Tom. Budget reconciliation.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Hassan. So on the budget reconciliation bill, that was the bill that would pass the House by 1 vote in May. It indeed makes huge cuts, historically at least, speaking to Medicaid, Medi-Cal, and SNAP, CalFresh. The Senate now has that bill. The Senate committees are not going to have individual hearings or markups, but the leadership of each of those committees this week and into next will present an outline of the cuts that they propose to SNAP and Medicaid. The senators on the Republican side are going to have a conference on on Wednesday, at least with respect to Medicaid and SNAP, where we'll learn more. So we may have additional detail from the Senate either late this week or early next. They have put themselves under a self-imposed deadline to complete the bill of July 4th. That's when the president would like that bill. Even whenever the Senate does complete its action, it has to go back over to the House. So most people believe that that's still a very ambitious deadline. And in fact, some senators on the Republican side say that it's not very realistic, that it may indeed spill over into the late summer and maybe be available for final passage before they leave for their August break. I'll just hit a couple of key notes to consider on both Medicaid and SNAP in terms of the cuts. The Medicaid cuts, there's a number of provisions in there, so I'm not going to go into the details of them, but combined, the cuts to the Medi-Cal program would result, according to the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, would result in about 7.8 million people losing their coverage over the next 10 years. And there have been separate studies using those numbers that estimate within the state of California between 1 to 2 million individuals would lose their Medi-Cal coverage, which of course would then shift costs, uncompensated care costs, to counties and other providers. One of the major pieces within that Medicaid provisions provisions is the work requirements. Under the bill, individuals that were under the Affordable Care Act expansion population would have to document that they either worked, volunteered, or in education for 80 hours a week. Congressional Budget Office has said that a lot of people are going to lose coverage, not because they're not working or involved in those types of activities, but because they're unable or to fill out all of the complicated paperwork to continue to be covered. The bill does not provide any new administrative money to counties or states, for that matter, to track those hours with the recipient. California, under the Medicaid cuts, would lose about $10 billion annually. It would be a $10 billion budget hit to the state. Moving over to CalFresh or SNAP, there are two significant cost shifts within the legislation. One, for the first time, would require all states to contribute to the benefits of the SNAP program. Currently, SNAP benefits are funded 100% federally. Within this bill, the House bill, there's a formula essentially that would tie the state's error rate, where they've made under-issuances or over-issuances of benefits, that would tie that to a percentage contribution to the program. California is basically in the middle of the pack in terms of error rates, but within the House bill, California would have to contribute for the first time 25% of the benefits for the program, which would cost the state about $30 billion over 10 years. Perhaps more concerning, especially for California's counties, is they would change the administrative match. Currently, the federal government and the state government share 50-50 in the cost of administering the SNAP program. In California, counties pay for about 30% of that administration, of the state's administration. The proposal would increase the state and county share to 75%. So basically a 50% increase in the state and county share of administration, which means that there would be a hit to counties in particular of about $190 million a year. So for Humboldt, whatever your administrative costs are in the SNAP or CalFresh program, under the House bill, expected to increase by 50% each and every year. Again, the Senate is considering the bill right now. They will modify these cuts to the extent they modify them. It's still unknown. I think the House has far deeper cuts than the Senate will agree to, but there will be a budgetary impact on both Medicaid and SNAP to the state and to the counties, I think, when this bill is at some point presented to the president for his signature. With that, I think that's what we have for you all in terms of state budgets. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions from the board? Supervisor Arroyo.
This almost feels like a silly question because I think it's like asking you to use divination skills to determine what will happen in the future. But since you all are watching the kind of more of the discussion happen in DC than certainly we are able to hear, I'm curious, do you think that they will get there with this bill given the divisions that are, or is it just too soon to say? I mean, the way that you framed it as when it gets to the point of signature makes it sound like you think they will get there, but if you know, what are your thoughts about that?
Very good question, Supervisor. I have been predicting everything wrong this year.
Me too.
Don't ask Tom.
So don't ask me. Let me put it this way. There is tremendous pressure. The GOP is experiencing tremendous pressure to pass something because this is the president's signature bill for this year. The politics on the Senate side really are just as tight as what we saw in the House. Senate can only afford to lose 3 Republicans. 2 right now have basically said no, based on the deficit, that this bill would actually increase the deficit. And there are a number of senators, at least 3 or 4 on the Republican side, that have made public their concerns about some of the Medicaid cuts. So it's a fine line that they're walking, but what we have seen or heard is that the Senate still is going to proceed to find Medicaid and SNAP cuts to pay for the federal tax relief that individuals and corporations would receive. I think they have to find a path forward, but again, it may collapse of its own weight. So how about that for a non-answer?
Perfect. Nailed it. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the board? Supervisor Wilson.
Have you seen any interest in this current administration's trajectory on any kind of infrastructure work? I mean, I know in the last time this administration was in office, there was discussion of it, never happened, and I was just wondering, is the word even being mentioned?
Supervisor, I'll take that question, and thank you for that. Yeah, you're right. It seemed like, you know, in President Trump's first term, it was like every week was infrastructure week. There was a lot of talk about infrastructure that did not come to fruition. What did come to fruition, of course, was the Infrastructure Act that was passed in the previous administration, Inflation Reduction Act. So you had those 2 big things, again, the IRA and then the IIJA Why am I forgetting what that acronym means, guys? Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. There you go. That was one. Now that was, just to remind folks, that big infrastructure bill under Biden carried, the foundation of that was the surface transportation bill, which basically has to be renewed every 5 to 6 years. So that was a pressure point. And then that was also a COVID era bill. So of course, as you all know, they built around that surface transportation piece. They included broadband, water, aviation infrastructure. It was, talk about big, beautiful bills. That was the definition of a big, beautiful bill. It was a big, beautiful infrastructure bill. They didn't call it that. With that said, that act is expiring next year under Trump's second term. So really, they're going to have to do something on infrastructure unless they want to let authorization expire for highway and transit programs, which they're not going to want to do. And so there will be an infrastructure bill next year, notwithstanding an extension of some current law, but there will be a pressure point and a deadline for Congress to act by next year, again, at least on the highway and transit surface transportation side of things. As to whether or not there's going to be more broadband funding, folks have said, hey, there's enough, state and federal broadband money in the pipeline now to serve every household that's interested. Water infrastructure, may or may not be renewed and included again. But in any case, we expect to see an infrastructure bill next year. The full scope remains to be seen, but certainly Congress will take a shot at reauthorizing the surface transportation programs.
Thanks. And through the chair, this may be just my observation, but it seemed like the bills of the last administration and the ones you were mentioning disproportionately funded rural communities disproportionately, just per capita, just more funding in our rural communities. And it seems like this particular bill that we're talking about right now disproportionately cuts money from rural communities in terms of per capita. Is that an observation that you see, or is it an analysis or is it just my understanding?
And that, Supervisor, you're comparing the current Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act compared to now the budget reconciliation bill where we see cuts. Are those the two you're comparing?
Yeah.
Or okay. In terms of disproportionately affecting rural areas, you wouldn't necessarily see that with the cuts that are pending in the budget reconciliation bill, because we're talking about cuts to entitlement programs such as primarily Medicaid and SNAP and some of the other things as well. So I think with this administration, there's talk, as there was in the first Trump administration, of prioritizing some rural areas. But in terms of what's pending right now in Congress, those cuts would really be across the board.
But I guess what I'm getting at is
one nuance.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I'm hearing from our healthcare providers that,
Yes.
rural communities are really being hit harder, disproportionately harder in terms of cuts in what's happening right now versus more urban spaces.
I see. I'm sorry, Supervisor. Tommy, please address that.
Yeah. So there may indeed be, not that it's in the bill itself, but there may be a disproportionate impact on rural communities, especially rural hospitals that are operating on razor-thin margins, even more razor-thin than their urban counterparts. And that issue has resonated, particularly in the Senate. But again, it's not because those hospitals or providers are targeted. It's just that the way that the financial margins in rural areas and the number or lack of providers would incur a disproportionate impact in those rural areas.
I appreciate that. I mean, whether rural areas are targeted or not doesn't diminish the results.
Exactly.
All right, thank you.
Supervisor Bohn?
Yeah, thanks for the report, you guys. I'm extremely excited to see about Garberville and Trinidad, because when we were back in Washington here a few months ago, that was two of our main rallying points. We got 2 out of 3. We had the public health building in there too, but that's somewhere out there somewhere. So But anyway, I was glad to see somebody listened in all those meetings, that was two of our top priorities, to get it looked at and get done. So maybe a trip to Washington is productive every once in a while. With your guys' help.
We appreciate your teamwork and you coming out and advocating. And yeah, we're cautiously optimistic. We hope that those will be funded in the FY26 process. And we're still waiting to hear on the public health lab, so that's still pending in the Senate. And we'll keep the board and Sean apprised of developments.
Okay, well, I do want to say, as far as the Garberville Street projects, Director Mattson is really, through Sean, has put in for those, and we got many signatures from the Southern Humboldt area, and so I'm glad to see that it's there again. You know, it's been approved 3 years, but not funded, 3 or 4 years and not funded, so fingers crossed, and also for Scenic Drive. Thanks for the report, and we're going to go back to Sean. You're done? Okay. Thanks, Sean. So then we are going to go back to Jessica.
Thank you, Chair. Kaylee, can we bring my presentation back up?
Yes.
I'm actually going to skip ahead because we only have City Manager Slattery here for a short amount of time. And so I will just introduce what we have him here for and let him go so that we don't take up too much of his time. So later on in the presentation, we'll discuss a couple of funding sources, the American Rescue Plan Act and the Local and Tribal Consistency Fund, of which your board heard on the last week on June 3rd regarding the American Rescue Plan Act dollars for childcare from North Edge Financing, that there's about $500,000 to reallocate, and there was interest in an employee child care facility. And so City Manager Miles Slattery from City of Eureka was kind enough to join us and give a little rundown of City of Eureka's program today. So I'll turn it over to him.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Board Chair and board members. So as Jessica said, we started in 2018-19 fiscal year. During that time, the city had not given raises to their employees in a very long time. We had a lot of recruitment and retention issues, started working on different programs in order to enhance recruitment and retention. We did a bunch of different things, gave out free zoo passes to employees, gave out free passes to the Adorney, other facilities that we own. We gave those passes, after school programs, as well as camps during the summertime we gave free to employees. At the same time, we looked into a pre-K program for employees. Fortunately for the city, it was the transition wasn't too difficult. We had a recreation program. The recreation program had employees that had the certifications necessary to be a state certified program, and we really wanted to be state certified so that we could compete with, not only that, but could compete with local programs, but also to be able to provide the best service to our employees. And so we had our, Parks and Recreation Coordinator at the time, Shannon Fazio, had the requirements in order to do that. And so we went through the application process. We also had a facility that was at the time being used infrequently for art classes and other types of programs. And so we repurposed the Ryan Center on J Street and made that our facility. The state certification program is really difficult as far as not only the facilities, but also the requirements of your employees that are working at that facility. And so at the Ryan Center, we internally did the modifications for the facility so that the bathrooms were adequate, the classrooms are adequate, and the ADA compliance was there. And then we went through the process, went through a recruitment process, hired it's not principal, I forget the title, but we hired somebody to basically do the day-to-day operations, and then the administrator became Shannon Fazio, who had other tasks assigned to her as well. Eventually, we got to the point when we first started, we only had the certification for 12 children. We doubled that with another classroom to 24, and then most recently, we just added 6 more with another classroom, so we have a capacity for 30. We offer free daycare for, excuse me, I don't call that, they get really mad when they call you that we offer free pre-K for all of our employees, and then we also cover 65% of the JPA of Humboldt Bay Fire for their participation in it. It accommodates any children that are potty trained, basically 2.5 to 5 years old. It's been really successful. We probably have, as far as spots, we have a capacity for 30. We have 28 in it. We have approximately 16 of those spots that are taken up by employees. Not all of them are full-time students. We have people with alternate shifts, so some people from HBF, from Humboldt Bay Fire, as well as EPD, only have certain shifts that they use. But overall, we have a full 28. We do have a waiting list. It has been successful in what it was intended to do. As far as recruitment and retention, it's been really good for our workforce, especially in public safety. It's been very helpful in getting folks there. The cost of childcare here, I don't know, I think you guys got the presentation from Cal Poly folks. It's really expensive, and the percentage of what people's salaries are really high here locally. And so it's been really successful. We have people that we've recruited recently that have very young children that are anticipating them being into the program, and they've come to our to the city because of the program. So it's been really successful. I know for you guys it'll be a lot different. Having the facility and having the qualifications, it was really difficult to hire a teacher. That was not even the hard part. The hard part is probably the administrator, because that administrator needs these qualifications in order to operate it. You're not required to have a state certified program, so if you choose to go a different route, you don't need to do that. You can still provide pre-K services without being state certified. But we found it to be very beneficial. It is in the black, even though we have 16 of the 28 that are free employees. Some of them are 65%, but it is in the black. We are not subsidizing it currently. There are times that we do subsidize it, but because of the facility and because we have, the administrator staff that does other work, it's been in the black ever since we've started it. So it's been really successful.
Supervisor Bohn?
Okay, so this isn't free child care for the employees, they pay for it?
No, it's free for employees. We have people outside of the agency because we don't have a full 28 employee, we don't have, if we had.
You've got about 55%, or
Yes,
sounds like.
and so the other folks that are part of the
So the
program
other
that aren't
ones-
employees, they are paying basically the going rate
What's
is.
the cost of the program? it's in the black, I'm just trying, when
The
over
cost
half of
is-
them aren't paying, I'm just trying to figure out, you might have found the motherlode of all businesses.
Well, we don't pay rent. We own the facility. We have an administrator
But you have
who
to
we
maintain
pay
it.
to do
Yeah.
other things,
Yeah.
which is nominal. And then, utilities, all of those things. We're not operating it like a business because we're empty, just like you guys have here. I mean, we do our water and sewer, and, we pay for all of our utilities for all of our facilities. It's not borne by that. So when I say it's in the black, we're not counting PG&E and water and all of those things. It's in the black as far as the staffing levels and what we pay for staff to go there compared to what we bring in for revenue. So it's in the black as it relates to that. I'm not taking into account, obviously, we don't pay rent. We don't, I don't factor in PG&E and other things like that.
Okay. And I'd advocate for this all day long, but when we run into the issues where a majority of our people are in this building, not the majority, but a lot of our people in this building, we're all over, and I don't think people, we have Garberville, we have so many outlying areas. I'm just trying to, but did you look at hiring one of the private daycares that were out there?
We looked into a partnership similar to Open Door has with Little Learners, and it was cost prohibitive.
Okay.
Extremely cost prohibitive. I would say that this was by far and away one of the better decisions we made at a government agency as far as its ability to I mean, let alone the cost itself, but for recruitment and retention. And we have department heads that are department heads now because they had this offered to them.
Perfect.
Any other questions? Supervisor Wilson?
So, I don't have any questions. I've talked to you about this outside this arena here, and yeah, it's been interesting watching you guys go through the process of getting there. And do you feel like the kind of the site ownership is sort of one of the main? It sounds like that's one of the main issues for making this work.
It's a big component. I don't know the administrator part. I can't put a value to because Shannon's been with us for 20 years and has run rec programs and after-school programs and all of those things. I know you guys don't have a rec program, but there could be somebody in your parks. I have no idea, but it's the job title. It's doing that. I think that if you look at an ongoing cost and you had this person solely doing that, now if you did that and you had your administrator overseeing satellite sites, so if you had one in Soham and you had one in East Humboldt and you had one here, something like that, I could see that being valuable because you guys have a hell of a lot more employees than we do.
Right, and I mean, and many of them are based here in Eureka. In terms of your employees, and then you have the external public agencies, so you're talking fire and what else?
Only fire. So fire is the one that's unique to our JPAs. We obviously pay 65% of the operational budget for that.
Okay.
And so we just made that reflective of what it is. We don't do anything for HWMA or HTA or anything like the rest of the participants are all just community members.
I see, but there's a potential for expansion for JPAs under this.
We are capacity-wise, no, not right now.
Well, I'm talking about in general. There's a market. There's probably a market for that because you're saying there's a waiting list now, right?
Yeah, and if you that based on Cal Poly's report, it would be great if you could get
right,
government entity or something like that in general to have participation would be great.
Right, because it's not just the price; it's the availability.
Yeah,
that's an issue. Because all right, I've heard enough. I'm ready for staff to talk about this. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
God, that was rude. Okay, thanks, Miles.
Kaylee, can you bring my presentation back up? I think he was ready to get out of here. All right, so I will go through the rest of my staff report. With that,
Everybody for a loop.
so today your board will have the opportunity to provide direction to staff. In particular, we will be looking at the American Rescue Plan Act child care funds that we just had a presentation from City Manager Slattery on. And we will also be looking for board direction on the local and tribal consistency funds. Director Mattson is here to present the Public Works Measure O spending plan for your board's approval. And we'll get final approval from your board on the Measure O administrative staffing allocations, and finally, for your board to consider giving staff direction to do a voluntary separation incentive program again this year. We already went through the special district budget, so I'm just going to circle back and talk about a few of the things that we went over last week at the proposed budget. So to quickly touch on a couple of slides we reviewed last week, the total proposed budget or spending plan for fiscal year 25-26 is $629.74 million, an increase of $21.5 million in expenditures, or 3.5% more than your board adopted for the current year.
Jess, can I interrupt? I apologize.
No, go for it.
So the presentation from Miles, we were just to hear the presentation, and then was giving the board opportunity to talk and ask questions. And I I wasn't quite done with him, but that's okay. And so
Yeah.
was there a direction that we needed from him or from you?
We will, when I get to the appropriate slide, I'll talk about that a little bit again, about what direction we're looking for from
Okay.
your board today. I just skipped to him. I was going to do him in the course of my slides, but he had to take off, and
Okay.
so I skipped
Okay.
ahead a little
Okay,
bit. Yeah.
I apologize. Thank
No,
you.
no, that's okay. Okay, as presented, the increase in the budget is not representative of the work departments have done to reduce expenditures during this cycle, and is increasing due to Measure O, budgeted at $27 million, and a one-time contingency for labor negotiations, budgeted at $5 million, offset by expenditure reductions in departments. And without those two items, the budget before your board would be showing a significant decrease. For the general fund, projected expenditures for 25-26 are $157.89 million in the proposed budget, or a decrease of $8.9 million or 5.3% from the prior year. This decrease is due to the movement of Measure Z, offset by, to its own fund, offset by moving probation realignment funds back into the general fund. Both of these moves will improve efficiency and transparency, but especially in tracking of Measure Z. Taking these changes into account, the total adopted general fund expenditures increase would be $6.7 million or 4.4% over the prior year. Projected revenues for fiscal year 25-26 are $137.14 million for the general fund, which is a decrease of $4.5 million or 3.2%. And again, that is due to the movement of Measure Z, offset by probation realignment. And if you consider those movements, revenue is increasing by $6 million or 4.6%, of which discretionary general fund revenue is just under $2.2 million of the increase, primarily due to property taxes and interest revenue. The use of general fund balance, as we discussed last week, in the proposed budget is $20.8 million, of which $8.8 million is due to contributions to the general reserve and deferred maintenance and the labor negotiations contingency. The, as we've called it, structural deficit or ongoing operating deficit is estimated at $12 million and is a reduction in that deficit from 24-25 of $3.1 million or 20.4%. And this is the slide. So 2 of the decision points for your board today include ARPA and LATCF funds. For ARPA, the remaining $1.9 million in ARPA funds is obligated to 4 projects, which we reviewed last week, to be expended in fiscal year 25-26. And your board heard the presentation from North Edge Financing last week that manages the Child Care Stabilization Fund, in which they presented 2 options for reallocating approximately $500,000 in the Child Care Stabilization Fund for another purpose. Option 1 was to build a program for North Edge to build a program to fund existing and new professional development initiatives and support people in early childhood education workforce. Or option 2, which your board expressed desire for, was to invest in a county employee child care facility. So staff will seek direction from your board to amend the North Edge contract to pursue one of these options. The Local and Tribal Consistency Funds, or LATCF, the CAO has recommended holding on to LATCF funds for future needs pending stabilizing the general fund. That's what's in the current fiscal year, and that is what is included in the proposed budget before your board. However, your board may provide staff direction on a different alternative. Currently, $500,000 has been expended for earthquake response, and just over $118,000 has been expended pending 100% reimbursement from the state for earthquake sheltering. At this time, $2.58 million remains unexpended, with just 2.33 million available to be reobligated. With that, staff have presented two options to your board. One is what is included in the proposed budget to leave LATCF funds unobligated, or option two is to consider utilizing these funds to invest in the county employee child care program, if that is what you choose to do with the ARPA funds as well. And of course, your board may provide different direction should you so choose. And with that, I was going to turn it over to Public Works Director Mattson. Yeah.
Can I clarify that, do you want the direction at the end of this presentation
Yes, please.
on those two items?
Yes, we'll circle back. I also have a slide to like remind us of our decision points for today.
Okay, thanks so much.
And with that, I'll turn it over to Director Mattson to present on the Measure O spending plan.
Good afternoon, Chair Bushnell, members of the board, Tom Mattson, Director of Public Works. So here's our proposed Measure O spending plan. We did run this very similar version. We've adjusted a few of the numbers around with the Technical Advisory Committee of HCOG last Thursday. They were generally supportive. It looks like the city of Fortuna, the city of Arcata, and the city of Eureka will be coming forward with some cooperative projects for us to consider, and so we will build those in. We are looking to put basically the funding in 6 boxes, and hopefully at the end of the year of the audit, we would like to have the flexibility to move funding around boxes if we need to, because some of the funding will not be used or hopefully won't be used. I'll go through that when I get to those slides. But we have multiple different projects that we can look at in case some projects fall apart, because if you've ever planned anything, you'll always know when you put the first nail in, the whole plan changes. So for emergency response, this is what I'm providing. This is a reserve for the roads division, basically going into winter months for storm damage. And at the end of the year, it could either be allocated to the deficit or for a spring surfacing contract. We have, I know it's kind of small, but hopefully people can blow it up. We have a number of grant match projects going on. We are proposing to take $4 million of Measure O to leverage about $20 million in outside funding to get all of our outstanding projects done. Many of these we had to defer some last year because we did not have the match funds to move forward. A lot of these are emergency response. The FEMA ones I am concerned about, but Federal Highways Bridge Program, Highway Safety Improvement Program, all of those funds are pretty well locked in. Again, FEMA is the biggest question at the federal level right now. But we do have approval from FEMA for all of these projects that are listed as FEMA projects. For road surfacing, we were proposing a little over $9.5 million. We've grouped projects around the county. We were able to come up with big enough projects to make some throughout the county, including Northeast County, North County, South County, and the Eureka area. Some of these, like Ishipishi Road, that is a combined project. We also have a Highway Safety Improvement Program striping grant for Indian Reservation roads. So we wanted to get that road done before we spent the money on the striping grant. These are contingency backup options. If the original list does not work, we wanted to have a long list of options that we could back up to. Things, whether contractor availability, whether there are culverts we did not find out about that need to be replaced. So if we have to pull projects out of the top list, we will be immediately going on to our secondary list. A number of these projects, whether they're on the main list or or on the contingency list. We will be evaluating for bike lanes after we resurface the road, especially roads like Hatchery Road that have a significant cycle demand on it from the city out to now the Simpson property and over the hill into Arcata. We are not proposing to put anything towards the fund balance at this time. There's a couple reasons for that. First off, you already put $3 million to the fund balance. While we pay a relatively low interest rate, when we're looking at our expenditures and the cost of materials, especially steel, going up well in excess of the interest rate we're paying, we believe at this time we should maximize our spending power and get what we can before the tariffs start to really hit us, especially on the steel. Again, at the end of the year, if we have funds left, we should probably roll those against the negative fund balance as recommended by the CAO. Maintenance I broke down into several things. There's the personnel. There's two engineers and one administrative assistant permanent position. We're requesting 9 extra help labor positions to help the crews through the summer, moving the entire mow crew and their equipment from Measure Z to Measure O. Materials and small contracts, that would be us purchasing asphalt for small projects we do, and contracting out some of our operations like grading that take a significant amount of time that we could be doing with our own crews, more ditching and more culvert cleaning and things that we have not been getting to in a year. So basically expanding our maintenance capability by bringing in private sector grading. And then equipment maintenance, $4 million is probably a maximum that we're going to look at. We're constantly refining. We're probably down to about 3.7 right now on our equipment replacement. The major cost on that is the replacement of our rock crusher system, which is over 50 years old. It still, to this day, it operates, but it's a struggle to keep it together, and we have to make the parts for it. But it keeps us very, very, very competitive in the rock base that we make for our roads. And if we're going to be contracting out grading, we're probably going to be using a lot more rock. With that, we do have a couple of complete streets components, nothing major this year. Our ADA curb ramp program is going to continue. We have a Hiller quick build project in McKinleyville that we're looking at. We've been working with the McKinleyville Municipal Advisory Committee on. Probably 75 to 80% of that is complete streets components. And then again, not shown here, but with all the other projects, our bike lane additions on some of the roads after we resurface them. So that is our proposed spending plan. Again, I would like to be audited on what we actually do in the boxes and be able to move things around as conditions may change, but that is our initial plan going into July 1st, and we would like to hit the ground running. Thank you.
So I'm going to have the board ask questions. I'm going to ask a question first, kind of out of, I'm not supposed to, but I'm going to. So I already, when this report came out on the agenda, you know, I got some calls already from constituents saying, I don't see Shelter Cove on there, blah, blah, blah. So I'm wondering, this is for your 1 year, right?
This is year 1.
Okay. And so, and thank you for this. It's on our agenda as well. You can pull it up. But so is there a way, Tom, to say, so that we can answer questions of people if they have them, to say, do you know what the second year looks like, or?
We can estimate the second year, but based on any given winter, that could completely change. And so we ran this through our Street Saver program, which is generally going to tell us what I've been telling you for years, is we need to maintain our good roads in good shape and pick up the bad ones a little bit at a time. And so we ran a 10-year report, a 5-year report, a 3-year report. We played with the numbers. They were part of the analysis, sends us all over the county in small little spots. So we had to kind of group projects in our first 3 years. So like Ishy Pishy was showing work for the first 3 years. So we pulled it all into year 1, and we pushed some other things out. And so there is a process, a scientific process we go through, and then we sit down with our engineering and maintenance side and said, okay, what's realistic here? What can we present? I can present a much longer plan, but I can tell you that it will be very hazy after year one because so much changes every year. If it's a perfect world, I could predict you a 5-year plan. But I don't know, if I get a big equipment breakdown, I'm going to need to move money. If we have major storm damage, I'm going to need to move money. This is not a magic solution to the entire road system. It is a huge shot in the arm, which will finally give us a surfacing program every year instead of a throw at the dart. And so I recommend we be very, very careful about putting in outer years. Even when I put things in, say, Measure U years ago, we still get calls from people saying, you promised you would do this. And it was a vote that failed. So I hate to set things out there to the public where they to set up their expectations, and then they're frustrated with government because we can't follow through because we had to make a change. But if you would like a longer-term plan, I can get you one that you can circulate, but I'm going to tell you, you're going to take a lot of calls in the future years when things request to get changed.
I mean, I anticipate that we'll get those calls anyways because, it's a large county and people want their tax dollars to affect them on their road. So we're going to field those calls anyways. One last question before I open it to the rest of my colleagues. If you get, say we were to get the $8.9 million for the Garberville Street project and the money for Scenic Way, well, those requests are not going to fund those projects completely. So, and they're not anywhere slated here currently. What would that look like for you?
That would come out of the bucket fund for the match in future years. So the match project bucket fund I showed you, that, I initially dreamed up, certain amount of numbers for, I was looking at trying to get a $12 million surfacing program going. But when I realized I had $4 million in Project Match, which is going to bring in another $20 million into the economy, we moved the money out of the one bucket into the other to bring that extra money. And I do need to front load equipment right now because a lot of our equipment is very ancient. And so as that need goes down, that money will move from bucket to bucket in different amounts in every year. And so this year, like I said, I started out with the 12 million, thinking I was going to get 12 million in surfacing. That got back down to 8 million to pay for other things that we actually need, much more than the surfacing right now that will help us in the future with better road maintenance.
Okay. Anybody else on my Supervisor Wilson?
And Tom, I appreciate that you're tracking for Complete Streets components, sort of ancillary to the work being done under Measure O. And I appreciate that there's this list of like matching, where we're looking for matching funds for all kinds of things. And again, this is why I keep advocating for just like even, I get it, you're asking for flexibility, the expectations of flexibility from these different buckets that you're talking about. And this is why I've been pushing for having a bucket called Complete Streets, even if it's, flexible in how it's applied, because again, there are programs that really give you so much more likelihood of funding if you are what they call self-funded. And so if it's a specific line item in our budget that shows that we have a set aside associated with Complete Streets, even if it's within our Measure O, and even if it's being spent in ancillary components, I just want to make sure, I'll just keep, me, I'll just keep gnawing on this one for a while, but I want to make sure that we're not missing any opportunities is what I'm getting at, to leverage external funding for Complete Streets projects wherever we can, and being flexible. So that's my only, I'm really actually very impressed with the amount, with the list and the, and sort of the nimbleness of what you're proposing here. So that's all I got for you.
I did forget a couple of Complete Street components. Was the rapid flashing beacons that we're putting in several locations under this as well.
Right. And so what I'm getting at is, even if they are under like a bucket, right, with that name on it, when there's external funding that may not be Measure O compliant, but may be Complete Streets compliant, it will be good if we're showing that we're really, doing that work. So thank you so much for letting me keep advocating for that. And like I said, personally, I would really like to see a number associated with it, even if we're unable to match that number. I got things. Sorry, I had a little spill over here. My computer's fine. So anyways, if we can just make sure that's there, if at all possible, I'm happy. I'm just mostly just grateful that we're able to get this work done, and I know that you're focusing on those components of the work, so thanks.
Supervisor Madrone.
Thank you, Chair. I like the plan, Tom, and I totally understand the need to be flexible. And I agree, there's a real danger in putting out a list many years out because people are going to declare blah, blah, blah. I mean, the good news that we're going to just continuously tell people is thank you. We now have funding to actually make progress on everything over time. Give us 50 years and we'll get to your road. Give us 10 years, we'll get to your road. So I like the concept. I like the way you're putting it in. And I like that you're prioritizing leverage, like you said, where we can put $4 million in and get 20 or 30 million back, that's huge. And it's also so great that this is our money. The state and the feds can't touch it, so that's an incredible aspect given all the news we heard from the feds and the state lobbyists about where things are at. Well, this one we don't have to worry about. We can program, we can budget for. The weather is always a wild card, and road damage and stuff like that. But, I want to say that West Haven Drive is in horrible condition, and I want to thank you for not prioritizing it because we're putting in a bunch of new pipes right now. And I know that's what your scientific data is telling you. You go through this process where you go, well, where is their planned burial of pipelines going to happen? Because we've seen it way too often where we pave and then we dig it up. So I appreciate that you're prioritizing things, considering all those aspects to it. So I just want to thank you for that. I'm so grateful the voters supported Measure O so we can actually start making a difference. I think my biggest concern in Public Works right now is the parks budget. And I know it's not specifically right in front of us right now because we're talking about Measure O, but as we are talking about the overall budget, I think you've got something like $15,000 to operate and maintain our entire park and trail system in the coming budget fiscal year, which isn't going to cut it. And staffing is horrible. And I don't know what we as a board want to do because we're not specifically talking about that right now, but we're going to be running through the rest of this final budget piece real quick tonight. So I could bring it up then. You're right. But I just very quickly want to say, I wish there was a way that we could probably provide at least $100,000 somehow to the parks budget. So I'll leave it at that because I don't know how we operate without that. But that being said, thank you for putting this plan together and moving us forward on that. Appreciate it.
Anything else? Supervisor Bohn?
Yeah, and I didn't, Tom, and maybe I missed it. I don't see equipment, but I know we've got a bunch of big equipment purchases planned.
Yeah, I have the list.
I see equipment maintenance where, I'm sorry, maybe.
Yeah, it's included in the equipment and the maintenance line. And it's.
But I hear it may exceed more than $6 million.
No. We actually, after our last conversation, we downsized a few things, including our trailer and our crusher, to get back on track to what we really need, not what we want. Yet, no, we're not getting that.
Thank you very much. That was something that.
No, we downsized the crusher to 80,000 pounds so we can haul it with a regular trailer, but we still need the 2 trucks in the trailer. And the 2 trucks don't just haul the crusher, they haul our end dumps, they haul all our equipment around, so they're busy all the time. And those are the 2 big, that's the big piece. The crusher is around $2 million, the truck's about 550,000, and then it's a bunch of the smaller equipment like sweepers and signboards and other things that we want to preload and get before the price of steel jumps up. And while we looked at kind of like the $3 million rollover as a kind of a one-time expenditure into equipment, so we wanted to front load that.
And I appreciate the list. There's a lot of good things on here. There's a lot of roads on here I've been asking for 12 years. And this is where I'd love to come in and come back on this because a couple of the roads on here, the only place there's been a pothole is where a public utility is dug a new line or anything else. And we have an agreement there to bring those back to original status. Well, every road that has failed, and I can take you to about 4 of them right now, and 2 of them are on the list, are completely from line exposures to either gas, water mainly, and those things. And those are different agencies that just patch it, throw it in and everything else, but they're responsible for that hole where our new pavement, and just like they said, not doing West Haven, somebody else is digging the hole, somebody else is doing the pavement, so it doesn't matter as much to one as the other. So what I'm trying to figure out is how to, and I know we don't want to upset our partners and, you know, and everything else, but I hear that the city of Eureka is going to come to us for some partnership agreements that we can work together. I'd love to, even though we miss it by about 60 feet, Oak and F. Oak and F was one of the highest rated things on our Measure Z. And that was able to be killed up here, and it was highly rated until we found matching funds. Well, I can tell you what, I was just at an accident there on Thursday. I was there at one the month before, and we had a few more things onto Broadway, a few more stop signs, and all this new construction that's just starting, and it's at night now, but when it switched to daytime, F is going to be, and F is nothing but a residential street with a very, very, very high amount of traffic. And the only thing I've ever got a compliment, well, they had a cute sign. The problem is that is a definite situation, 1 block from a school, that we have no control, no blinking light, no anything. We have a island in the middle of the street where people get to run into. And a couple of bull bus trucks can't make the turn. So we've taken those trucks and chased them up to the other Spruce and all the other streets up farther. They're turning up there now. But I would love to see that have if we're out looking for matching funds and for safety, health reasons and everything else, much like Trinidad, I would love to see that followed up with and see, because that was an approved project at one time till this board got a hold of it and took it away. So I would have, you know.
If I could note on that, we are proposing to move forward with the flashing beacons there, and we do have a grant for that as the next step, and the ultimate goal is to get to that signal.
Because, I mean, I actually think we have them at 8th Street, but I don't think we have the flashing, don't we have beacons?
We have them all over the place. We have, but we do have a specific grant for one at F and Oak that's going to construction this summer.
It just worries me with as many kids and everything else, but I would still maybe look at a stoplight. There were 9 cars backed up the other day. I was one of them, sat there for 2.5 minutes. Now, 2.5 minutes doesn't seem like a long time, but it's quite a bit of a long time when you're just trying to pull onto a street.
So there seems to be interest in the flashing beacon things. Is there maybe an update you could give our board about where those are going to be placed with this new plan?
I've got 3, I believe, going in this summer, 1 on Washington Street in McKinleyville, 1 on Country Club in Willow Creek, and 1 on Oak and F.
Okay. And then I think if, you know, what Supervisor Bohn's talking about is outside of this plan, I think that if he wants, he could probably bring something to the board. I don't know. But it's not on this plan, right?
It's not on this plan for this year, no.
Yeah. Okay, any other comments? Nope, okay. Do you have anything else to add, Director Metzen?
No, just to thank the voters for having faith in the county.
So I, too, also appreciate, you know, this plan, and that you know, really targeted a large area, and that I know your intent, the department's intent is to get pavement on the roads so that, you know, the voters can see that. And so I appreciate that so much, and I know our board does, and also thanks to the voters so much for trusting us and really saying roads are our priority. So before we go on to the next item, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come right back. So it is 3:03, and so we'll be back at 3:10.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate it.
All right, Kaylee, can you bring my presentation back up? Skip ahead here. All right, I will just jump back into Measure O. At the proposed budget, your board considered staffing allocations for administrative staffing needs for Measure O. These included a senior fiscal assistant for the auditor controller, a deputy county counsel for the county counsel's office, an administrative analyst for the CAO management and budget team, and a buyer for the purchasing team. These positions are before your board today for approval to be incorporated into the fiscal year 25-26 budget. And per the discussion with your board last week, the administrative analyst position on the CAO management and budget team was directed to be shared between Measure Z and Measure O. Any staffing allocations to central services departments that are in the cost allocation plan will be billed through that mechanism, which is 2 years in arrears. Which are all of the departments listed except for purchasing. The general fund allocations in those departments will need to be increased, in which costs will be recouped from Measure O through the cost allocation plan. The first charges for any new staffing allocations in those departments will not be charged to Measure O until fiscal year 27-28. As to not increase the overall general fund budget, your board may direct staff to reduce general fund contingencies by $402,901 in order to fund the increases in the general fund. As it will be 2 years before the charges are recouped, your board may also direct staff to utilize contingencies for this purpose in the coming fiscal year 26-27. And so staff seek direction from your board to incorporate these into the adopted budget and increase the general fund contributions accordingly. And with that, these are the final decision points that I have before your board today. Of course, your board is able to provide direction to staff on anything else in the proposed budget as well. Those decision points, which we haven't really discussed yet, are consideration of a voluntary separation incentive program. Your board has utilized the VSIP in fiscal year 23-24 and 24-25, which has provided a tool for departments to reduce expenditures through attrition. This year, staff are proposing your board consider a VSIP program again. Departments have indicated that this would be useful in continuing to reduce expenditures. Staff are requesting approval from your board to develop a program substantially similar to the program offered in 24-25 and direct staff to return in July for final adoption of the program. And then ARPA, as we discussed, the decision point is to direct staff to amend the contract with North Edge Financing to reallocate approximately $500,000 for one of two options, including investment in a county employee child care facility. And the next one is local and tribal consistency funds. We are looking for staff direction on the $2.33 million in available funds to be reobligated, and the presented options include keeping those in the in the fund to maintain the general fund at a future date, or to invest in the county employee child care facility. And then for the Measure O spending plan, staff are just looking for approval of the Measure O spending plan. And finally, as I just mentioned, we're looking for you to direct staff to incorporate the 4 positions I previously mentioned for Measure O administrative staffing. And with that, I'm available for questions, and however your board should so choose to move forward.
So if we could you go back to the one slide on the things that we need to make decisions on? Mm-hmm. And so we'll go to questions after this, but if my board is okay with it, maybe we could go item by item there, and Jess, maybe you could take the notes and then help with the motion so Kaylee can incorporate it all, or maybe Alicia could?
Yeah.
Would that be okay? Okay, so now we'll go to question.
Did you want to do public comment?
Oh, let's do public comment. So I will open it for public comment on the Zoom.
There is none, Chair.
Is there any public comment in the room? Yeah, McMack.
Yes, McMack. Okay, this is my time. First off, thank you very much for running the opportunity. What I would like to bring before the board is hopefully is a very small amount, and I do have a great deal of understanding, and I'm appreciative of the fact that the challenges all of you face in trying to run and be fiscally responsible for our county governance. So thank you for that. We have, over the last several years, at the McKinleyville Municipal Advisory Committee, received a $5,000 from the county to help. As we've moved forward with working with the different county departments, with Public Works on the Hiller Quick Build, with the Town Center Ordinance, with the Planning and Building, we've mostly used that funding to reach out to the community. That's at our past meeting we just had, we had quite a few members of our community came to us saying, we don't know what this is all about. We've never heard about this. What's going on with the town center? What's going on with this? And I'm like, well, we've had, I think Jack Durham with the newspaper pointed out 40-some meetings on this over the last 6 years. So that funding is necessary for us to continue to reach out to the community and to try to receive the public comment so that we can channel it back to you so that we can all make better decisions for the governance of our community. So that is my request before you. I'm available for any questions you might have.
So we can't do back and forth questions, but your supervisor from McKinleyville can steer us there if we have questions.
Very good. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I have some questions for you. Is that the appropriate way? Some clarifications.
Gonna look at council actually because it's public comment and I don't know if we can. I can close public comment and then let me close public comment. And then if one of the supervisors wants to call someone up for clarifying questions, I think we can do that. There you go. Public comments closed.
Supervisor Bushnell, can we actually take the Zoom call? They've been waiting for a long time and they just came back on.
The Zoom or the?
Yeah, they left during our break and just came back as you were closing.
Sure.
Thank you. Caller 5288, I will unmute you and you'll have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, Kent Sawatsky here. I did want to make comment. I really appreciate Public Director Tom Madsen. Totally support him being able to move from whatever bucket to bucket he feels is appropriate and giving him the flexibility to do so. Greatly appreciative, and I'm sure the people of Blue Lake are, that there will be some work done on Hatchery Road. It's been a major concern to us in the area out there with all kinds of wonderful people participating regarding the Green Diamond mountain biking thing out there that wasn't safe. People were out in the street. Unfortunately, and we were fortunate we didn't lose any. We're also hoping that Hatchery Road will also project will benefit the city in the what's starting to fire up now, the recreation on the Mad River. A friend of mine, Julie Christie, said she had a video and she counted 300 cars in that area at one time, and the parking or the side thing portion of the road is again extremely unsafe. And so if we're able to improve the shoulders in those areas, whatever we can do, it will be a great benefit to the public health, safety, and welfare. So I did also wish to make mention that, and I don't think we probably have the people online anymore, but as has been mentioned, a great amount of concern regarding the FEMA funding, and if we could get some more certainty on that would be important. I was left after having a conversation with Director Madsen in the past that FEMA owes us $7 million, I think, if I recall, from prior funding that we've already done the work for, that we really can't count on. So if somehow the people back in Washington, D.C. can check on that. I know there's projects that we have in Blue Lake, a tank project, again, that's related to the safety issues, and it goes to Cal OES, and they weren't sure whether FEMA, they couldn't get a phone call back from them when I spoke with them. If we get clarity on that, I think that'd be great. Appreciate the time you're taking on this today, and look forward to the meeting tomorrow. And thank you for taking my taking my comments here at this time.
Thank you, that's all, Chair.
Okay, so I'm going to close public comment, and then I think, so we're going to go to questions for Jessica first, clarifying, and then, Jess, does anybody from the board have any clarifying questions for Jessica?
Kaylee, can you bring up my presentation?
Are you going to ask her questions about that list? So we're going to, for the motion, we're going to go down through one by one, and Alicia is going to take notes to help us get a motion together. And so if you have questions on that, I think if Supervisor Madrone could ask his questions of the audience first. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, and the rest of the board. Yeah, I just want to make sure that I'm hoping our board will consider the Micmac question as one of those decision points. It's really budget dust, frankly, and I know all money matters, but you know, it's like 0.00003% of the budget. It's budget dust, and it frankly has done a tremendous amount of work in McKinneyville. Kevin is one of the long-standing members of the Micmac, been at it for, what, 10 years now, Kevin, maybe 12?
A little over 10.
A little over 10 years, and
My pay raise.
and I remember last year I tried to actually cut back on the amount of money because of the budget concerns, and this board pushed back on that and said, no, we're going to allocate $5,000. Conditions haven't changed much at all, except the fact is, as Kevin said, you know, we have this really huge obligation and desire to increase our public engagement, public outreach, and we have an opportunity to partner with a volunteer group of planners who are willing to come and help us with expanding that public outreach. And this $5,000 would go a long way towards helping make that happen. The other request, not only the $5,000 in this budget year, but also to roll over the remaining funds that were allocated last year. So it's really a double request, and I appreciate this board being willing to consider it as one of those other items.
Okay, thank you. Can we pull that list back up, Kaylee? Sure.
You know, instead of coming back to us every year for this amount of money, can we just say for the next 5 years, this is a consistent funding stream and move on from there? So I don't have, thanks. That would be great, because this subject is not going to go away in the next 5 years, and there's going to be need for this engagement, and this is a minimal cost, and so I feel like save some time about having this conversation every year.
Can you include, and we'll do a straw poll really quick, but how about fund the Micmac for the next 5 years and include rolling over each year?
Yep.
So that they get that. And is this board okay with that direction?
In the amount of $5,000 annually.
Yeah, annually. With the rollover if they don't spend that $5,000 allowing. Okay. So I see you have, okay. And then, so the voluntary separation, and once again, the CAO is going to help us, and then whoever's going to make that motion can ask Alicia for if they need it. So the voluntary separation incentive program, is this board okay with that for the 24-25 year? Do I see nods, or are there any questions? Okay.
Apologies, that should say 25-26.
I'm sorry, 25-26, and I should know that. Okay, and then, so the ARPA discussion is to direct staff to amend the contract with North Edge to reallocate $500,000 for option 1 or 2. Can we go to option 1 or 2 for this board to look at? And, okay, and so, so this is the next point that we'll have, and so I'm going to open it to the board for questions. Supervisor Bohn?
And just out of curiosity, this North Edge is a different firm. Don't we have the bandwidth in ECDev or something else to handle this? Why things are, I mean, we could say no, I guess, but I mean, don't we have some of the bandwidth available to do that? I see. How much are they doing it for free?
Jessica wants to answer that, I think.
I know.
Through the chair, we're recommending to go with North Edge because this is funds that have already been given to them through the existing contract, and the obligation deadline for ARPA was December 31st, 2024. So we do not recommend trying to then re-obligate that to a different entity.
Supervisor Madrone.
Do we have a building? I mean, the thing with Eureka, the big thing was they had a building. Do we have a building to actually make, if we put this money towards investing in a county employee child care facility, which I fully support, I think it's a great idea. But do we have the facility to make it financially doable? As Mr. Slattery said, that was a huge piece to making that work.
So if your board is supportive of using the funds to explore a county employee child care facility, then we'll return with, verbose details on that. And yes, we'll TBD if we have a facility that is functional for this purpose, but staff would seek to identify the most cost-effective mechanisms to establishing this program, and clearly that was a highlight of the city manager's presentation, that utilizing a county-owned facility is optimal.
Well, I would be supportive of that if we're not talking about using, $200,000 or $300,000 on this study to determine if we can spend it. I mean, $500,000 could be a lot of money towards actually doing it. So if we're talking about 10 grand or something to really look at the situation and come back with a report, that sounds great, but I wouldn't like to see, vast amounts of the money spent
Absolutely.
for something that I would think we could figure out for probably not.
Staff can do, we're not proposing that we bring in a consultant for that.
Okay.
We'll partner with North Edge on it.
Thanks for that clarification.
And probably some with Cal Poly, and it'll be a primary lift on staff.
Supervisor Bohn.
And I think we've discussed this before. I fully support, but City of Eureka has approximately 1/10 the employees that the county does. So, and pretty well diversified, much more. So the staff. So I'm trying to wonder, and as Supervisor Madrone said, it's in the black, but it doesn't pay utilities, maintenance for the building, doesn't pay for this. We don't charge for the administration. Do you have an administration person that has enough time in 20 years that could step up and do this? I mean, it sounds like a great idea, and it would be a great idea. But as we're seeing, most of the major companies are stepping back from having the child care and accepting also the liability that comes with that also. So you're opening it up that it becomes an unfair, in our situation especially, it becomes, we're, City of Eureka is 11 square miles or whatever the case may be, and we're 4,400 square miles or whatever it is. So we're going to have employees out in the hitherland saying, I'm not getting the same advantages as, so would you underwrite my daycare out in wherever it may be? So I worry about opening too many cans of worms, and it sounds great and everything else, but they're putting off a lot of the costs into other areas because they don't have a cost. But they do have a cost. It's just not broken out. Ours has to be broken out, and in this,
Supervisor Arroyo.
Thank you. My understanding of this from our presentation the other day as well was that the purpose of allocating this was to do the feasibility study so that we would answer all these questions. And then any remaining funds, should there be excess funds, and this is already funds we have that can't be repurposed for too many other things. So, regardless of whether we're only able to serve a portion of the need in our community per the feasibility study, it would still make a dent. And this is clearly not an issue that's going away and anything that's getting easier for families. So I'm all in for conducting the feasibility study and moving the needle a little bit more in the direction of where we want to get. And that way we'll understand what facilities we have or could use that might work, and how it could be structured, and how it could address the greatest needs, and how we could, potentially implement something with a phased approach. I think that's the whole point of this whole study. If for some reason during the process of doing that feasibility study they go, gosh, this is just totally a waste of time, then we could always pivot and do some education and professional development. If it was like, wow, this is just not going anywhere. But I suspect that a feasibility study will answer many of the questions that we're asking up here. So I'm very in favor of it.
Thank you. I'm wondering, for the education and professional development, are there applications in now from our staff that are waiting for this direction, that are waiting to do that? Or is that always just a request?
This was through North Edge for childcare providers, correct, Sean?
Oh, for the education portion,
Yeah,
okay.
yes.
And so that was not our staff, that was for outside, okay.
Existing childcare providers.
Thank you for clearing my head up. So on that note, I am also in very much favor of trying to see if it's feasible to do childcare for our organization. And I know that the outlying areas, it could get a little sticky, but most folks, even from Southern Humboldt that work for the county, live up here and travel down there. And it's not very many folks down there that do. I don't know of any actually that live down there and travel this way. It could change, and I hope that it does, because I know we have good jobs, but I do think it's so important. I've heard so much about how hard it is to get childcare, and how stressful it is when your childcare has the flu, and then you have to call your boss at our organization and say, I can't work today, and it's just it's a lot for families. So I am in total favor. I think I've heard 2, 3, Supervisor Bohn said he was in favor. Mike, how do you?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, it's a priorities situation, and I mean, if we're talking about buildings and structures, where we just financed a pretty large chunk, in sort of the financing of a building, and now we're getting squeamish about financing for something else. I just want to be clear that from my perspective, it's like I want us to take a look at this, but I want us to be realistic about what that the burden of that is moving forward. So yes, I'm very much in. I mean, for me, this is the priority, and so. But I want to make sure that we have something left over to do it with. I'm hoping that this will also run through the facilities ad hoc, so that it's in the matrix of all of the capital investments and improvements we're talking about countywide, so that we understand where that sits in all of that after you guys get information. So with that, I'm in favor.
Okay. Can we pull that list back up, Kaylee? Go back to the green one.
Yeah, I can.
So now it's the,
You
we
wanna
have a
stay on the
clicker.
I do have a clicker now.
That's great. So now it's the LATCF that we need to talk about?
Yes, and the two options for your board to consider that staff put forward, of course, you could provide different direction. These funds are fairly flexible. The two options presented were to either hold that $2.33 million pending stabilization of the general fund, or consider utilizing those funds for the county employee child care facility program.
Thank you. I have a question. I'm curious, with the issue that's going on with the parks, the county parks, is it possible to utilize money from here, $100,000 to sustain our county parks?
It is possible, and I would advise against it. A lot of the way we have ended up in this deficit situation is by utilizing one-time funds for ongoing expenditures. So yes, these funds are eligible to be used for that purpose, and it will still be a problem when these funds are gone.
Okay, so this monies we need to talk about and decide what to do with, and so I'm going to open it to the board. Supervisor Madrone.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, Jessica. You know, it is one time, but it is also true that if we don't allocate this, we're going to be closing parks this summer. Swimmer's Delight, big sign, closed. Away County Park, closed. South County Trail around the bay, closed. I mean, you know, from what I'm hearing from Public Works, they typically run a very shoestring budget maintaining our parks and our trails at about $100,000 a year. And they used to be able to get 60, 70,000 of that from the leftover money through the transit unmet needs process and some other things. But that's not available. It's just simply not. So they've got 15,000. And so they're telling us as a board, maybe not here today, but through communications, that they have $15,000 and they're understaffed as well. So that means closure of parks, literally. So I'm not comfortable with that, frankly. And I am uncomfortable with the other thing that you said, that you would advise against it. I would too, but that's not the whole picture. The whole picture is that if we don't allocate, let's say 85,000, because they've got 15, from this budget to parks and trails maintenance, then I think we're basically saying we're willing to close the parks this summer. And I'm not willing to do that. So there's my argument for.
Supervisor Wilson.
Yeah, I mean, I'll put out that, sure, we can allocate 100,000 to the Parks and Department, and I think we should do that. We don't have to allocate it out of that fund, is all I'm getting at. That can just basically be a general fund allocation, reallocation we can deal with, and we'll deal with it in how the budget looks at the end. And I would maintain that we keep the LATCF funding in one block currently until we have a ripe discussion about what that potential could be. So for me, I support the allocation. I just don't think it needs to come from that bucket in particular, just so we can hold that whole until we need to come back for another day to talk about what that is going to do. And it may be on the rears that we have a budget deficit that we need to pull from that, but I wouldn't pull from it today, because once we break into it like piecemeal, I don't want to see it break apart. So that's just and we're only talking about one allocation today that I can see besides the McMack thing, which is this parks. I think considering our history on this, I think that that's pretty good, and I think we'll hold, from my perspective, we can hold with that. So those are. Yeah, I think it's a reasonable request, and but it doesn't need to come from that line item. So thanks.
Can we please pop that thing back up? Yeah, there. Okay, so there's 2.2 million unobligated out of the 2.33 million. Is that correct?
So it's actually 2.2 million is fully unobligated. The $131,897 is available to be re-obligated from the earthquake response due to reimbursement from the state. And eventually, hopefully, that $118,000 will also be available to be re-obligated pending receiving full reimbursement. So it would be 2.33 million if you re-obligate from the earthquake response there.
So so it would be the 250,000 plus 118,000 that would go all to Habitat for Humanity for the
250,000 is what remains obligated to Habitat for Humanity.
And then the 118,000 is pending 100% reimbursement from the state from the earthquake?
That was for earthquake sheltering, yes. That's
Okay.
already been expended. We're just waiting on reimbursement.
Okay, and then the 131 897 is available to be reallocated for earthquake response.
That was the remainder of the sheltering funds that have already been reimbursed.
So would the 250 and the 131 be combined for earthquake recovery? I am asking, I'm sorry.
The remaining obligation that is still out there to be paid for earthquake response is the $250,000 to Habitat for Humanity. The rest of the earthquake response funds have been expended, with the exception of that $131,000.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Bohn.
Thank you, Chair Bushnell. So has Habitat for Humanity spent the money? Because we got the report the other day, and to this day, I don't know what the heck they've done. They brought a bunch of food in, but I'm just saying, how obligated are we with them?
So we are in the middle, through the chair, we are in the middle of working on a contract amendment potentially for Habitat for the remaining $250,000, just due to some contract details. And so that conversation may need to come back to your board pending where that lands.
Through the chair, okay. So is it obligated? Are we entering into an agreement to obligate it? Or are we going into contract arrangements to not obligate it?
It is obligated via contract currently. Yes. The $250,000 has been expended. And then they were requesting upfront payment of the remaining $250,000.
Through the chair, the ROI on giving this money to parks, you close down AWA for the summer, the sales tax dollars you're going to lose between Petroleum Store and Honeydew Store, although not great, but you start adding up what Highway 36 brings in, what the other parks bring in, all the way through the whole system, and we close them, some of those people aren't going to come because it's not free by any manner. But it hasn't been that long ago, if everybody looks back, our Parks Division ran Grizzly Creek State Park because the state couldn't afford to run it. We ran it, so now I'm looking at closing some of our parks. This has gone full circle, and closing our parks would be before they started the reservation system, there would be 40 people camped in the parking lot at Public Works trying to get in to get swimmers to do any of those parks out on 36. So
Thank you. So I spoke with, so there are, from my understanding, the obligated $250,000, there are projects out that they're waiting. And then the other monies, they have people that are qualified that are waiting for those funds, but out of funds through that. And so that's the request. And so through this board, or talking to my colleagues, those funds are going directly to earthquake recoveries, and that the folks have qualified for. They're just waiting for this board to make a decision. This is making good on the monies that we already said we would utilize. And while Habitat, it was slow to see any of the recoveries. They did make a difference. That money that we obligated did make a difference to the folks in Riedel and to those homes. Granted, it was not as many as we wanted to see. Money doesn't go as far as it used to. But I would like to be able to honor our obligation that we already said, and to finish out those contracts, which is, they're just waiting for this board to say okay, which is today. And then my preference, and we can talk about it, but is to, so if we don't obligate the rest of that money, it just sits there?
Correct. That's how it is presented in the proposed. And to the Habitat point, we don't necessarily need an action from your board on that today. That is the previous action we have.
So just to keep the money the same as it is right now, and then just
that's what's reflected in the proposed budget. Yes.
Okay, so I'm okay with that. If we can just say how we feel.
I'm going to take it one step farther. If we're going to do the $100,000 this year, I wouldn't mind saying $100,000 for 5 years for the parks.
We're not talking about the parks right now on that. We're talking about possibly doing the parks from a different fund.
fully understand,
Okay.
but we were just talking about.
So you were proposing that we do the money from the parks here?
No.
Go ahead.
If I could interject here a little through the chair. The notes that I have regarding the funding for the park would be to direct staff to return with funding recommendations, because this idea did just pop up today, and we've been talking amongst CAO staff around what the best mechanism for funding this is. So I think we could certainly find it. We can certainly do a 5-year spending plan on that, but I think some conversations with Director Mattson and his staff and internally should take place so that we can bring forward a well thought out plan to how to make that investment.
Thank you.
And then for the habitat, you all did already give us the direction to keep the funds in the bucket for habitat, and thus we're working to amend that contract so that it just has a little bit more clarity around the disbursement of those funds, and we'll return to your board with that contract amendment. Should your board want to pull back on that funding at that point in time, we could do that when the contract amendment comes forward.
So it would stay the same right now, those item, yeah.
Correct.
And I think the board said Supervisor Bohn.
And that's the only thing I was saying was, I know it was still in the, it's kind of willy-nilly up here, the 100,000, if we just do it for 1 year, people are going to say, well, they only finance in the parks for 1 year. If we're planning our vacations, maybe we should all plan on going somewhere else. I think we need to make a commitment to our parks. That was all.
Thank you. Can we pull the list back up? So we did those two?
We still need direction on LATCF if the direction is to keep the 2.33 million
Yes.
Or to use it for the child care program. It was the other option presented by staff.
I think, Supervisor Madrone.
Yeah, no, I think we hold on to it until we get the study done,
Yeah.
and then we can determine with another motion down the road on how to allocate for that project.
I agree. Does the rest of this board agree? Yep, you got shaking heads, yep. And then back to the boxes.
And our heads aren't just bobbling because it's late and we're tired, it's, we were saying yes.
Okay, so then Public Works Measure O spending plan, are we agreement of the Measure O spending plan?
Yep.
Okay, got a yes on that one. And Measure O administrative staffing, are we agreement on that? You got nodding heads. So if someone on this board wants to put a motion together, and I think CAO Hayes is gonna go ahead.
We'll actually want to continue the hearing to 5:30 p.m.
To do the
and-
motion then?
Yes, we'll
Okay.
take the motion after public comment at 5:30.
So we're done?
I could just go through my notes that I have for that motion
Sure.
so that we can wordsmith that if needed when we return at 5:30. I've got that your board moves to fund the MCMAC $5,000 annually plus allow for a rollover for a 5-year period. Direct staff to return with a VSIP program parameters. Direct staff to evaluate an employee child care program and return with recommendations and amend the North Edge contract accordingly through the utilization of ARPA and LATCF funding. Potentially. I'll put some loose words in there that for right now, that's the goal of those dollars. Direct staff to return with funding recommendations to support county parks and trails and approve the Measure O spending plan and staffing allocations.
Thank you. I think this, yep. Supervisor Bohn.
And thank you. I think people should be aware, because I've heard it all. I heard 10 people go, okay, I voted for Measure O, I want the money. You know, it would be nice we let people know when the money's going to flow, because they think it's going to pave the front of their street today. The other thing is, one of the things I heard a lot, they didn't want to see it spent all on administration. Well, today we put 4 pieces out there, which account for 2% of the total value of Measure O, which is far below the average of what people would do. Administrative costs run anywhere between 9 and 15%. We're putting it out there for 2%, so we don't overload our staff, so they're still able to do their other problem. So this is just, all this was informational to people. We're not overspending your money. We're trying to use it as wisely as possible. I think Tom's going to have a spending plan. I appreciate the adjustments he's already made. So we're trying to get the money. I mean, basically, we're trying to put it on the road first. We want you to see it. It was said earlier. Let's put it on the road first, and then later on, we'll get all the other stuff that we need to do that goes along with this.
Thank you. So Supervisor Madrone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, and just to be clear, I think the funding positions under Measure O, the one that's split in particular between Measure Z and Measure O, some of the duties there are in fact public information outreach, if I heard correctly in the discussions last week. Because it was recognized that even with Measure Z, we need to do even more. Not that we're doing our best, but we could do more. And this position allows us to do that for Z on public safety and for O on roads. So I think that's a great fit there. The other thing is, just to be clear on the parks and the parks budget, Parks Trails budget, coming back with a spending plan or whatever you called it, a funding plan. That's for $100,000 for 5 years, if I heard correctly from the direction from the board. Just to be clear, $100,000 a year for 5 years. Mm-hmm. A spending plan for that was what I believe we heard saw the nodding heads for, just to be clear. And then MCMAC $5,000 per year for 5 years.
She said that.
Did she say that
Yeah,
one?
she did.
I did say 5,000 on MCMAC. I didn't clarify exactly an
numbers.
allocation on the parks and trails, because I do think that we should have a conversation with what the need is. Again, this came up this morning, and 100,000 is being thrown out there. It might be more, it might be less.
Fair enough.
We don't know till we have that combo.
Fair enough. Okay. Thank you.
Jessica.
On the Measure O staffing allocations, I just need to know from your board, would you like us to increase the general fund allocations or decrease contingencies? There was a contingencies point of that. Would your preference be to not increase the overall general fund budget, so therefore decrease the contingencies budget for those new allocations?
Go ahead.
Contingencies out of Measure O.
No, this would be your general fund
Okay,
contingencies.
Okay.
There is just under 1.5 million in general fund contingencies right now. This would bring it down to 1.1 million.
And that would not change your overall utilization of the general fund.
Correct.
We're nodding heads.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so we will come back. We're going to be go to recess and continue at 5:30. Thanks for putting up with my willy-nilly, and we'll be back at 5:30. Hi, so we are back from recess, and we will go back to CAO's office with Deputy Jessica Maciel, but I think maybe Alicia will update us, or no?
We'll go straight to Jessica, continuing the public hearing from this afternoon to 5:30, and Jessica will go through a brief update of the slides presented this afternoon and the potential motion that's on the floor, and we can take public comment, your board can deliberate, and we'll wrap this show up.
All right, thank you, CAO Hayes. Good evening, board. Kaylee, if you don't mind bringing up the present, thank you. We will just quickly go through the slides that you all saw at the 1:30 hearing. No special districts this evening. We already approved the special districts this morning. As a reminder, the total proposed budget is $629.74 million. The proposed general fund budget is $157.89 million, which includes a $5 million one-time labor negotiations contingency, $3 million to reserves, and just under $750,000 to deferred maintenance for an estimated ongoing fund balance or use of fund balance / budget deficit of $12 million, which is an improvement of $3.1 million over the current year. The first funding source that we discussed earlier is the American Rescue Plan Act. There was approximately $500,000 available to your board to reallocate. Your board in the prior hearing directed staff to choose option 2, which was to invest in a county employee child care facility. So the staff direction is to amend the North Edge financing contract in order to pursue that. And then the LATCF, there was $2.33 million for your board to consider obligating, and you elected to go with what is presented in the proposed budget, which is holding the funds. You heard a presentation from Public Works Director Tom Matson on the Measure O fiscal year 2025-26 spending plan, and intend to approve it as is. Additionally, you directed staff to include 4 administrative staffing allocations, and are considering it as presented here. Finally, there were 5 decision points for your board that we went through, including a voluntary separation incentive program, ARP, as we discussed, LATCF, Public Works Measure O spending plan, and the Measure O administrative staffing. In addition, your board provided additional direction on an allocation for the McKinleyville Municipal Advisory Committee and for parks and trail, for staff to bring back funding recommendation on parks and trails for ongoing. And so with that, I have what staff deemed to be the motion on the next slide. So I'll quickly run through that and then turn it over to your board and so that we may receive public comment. So the first one there is the MCMAC, to fund the MCMAC annually, an additional $5,000, and allow for carryover of unspent funds for a 5-year period. The voluntary separation incentive program to direct staff to return with BSIP parameters for fiscal year 25-26. For ARPA, direct staff to evaluate an employee child care program, return with recommendations, and amend the North Edge contract accordingly, with the anticipation of using ARPA and potentially LATCF as a funding mechanism. Parks and Trails, direct staff to return with funding recommendations to support county parks and trails. Measure O, approve the fiscal year 25-26 Public Works Measure O spending plan and staffing allocations and direct staff to reduce general fund contingencies in order to appropriately fund. And finally, we will be recommending that your board consider setting June 24th for the adoption date of the budget. With that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the board? We will go out to public comment, and we'll start on the Zoom.
Thank you, Chair. Caller 5288, I will unmute you, and you will have 3 minutes.
Hold on 1 second.
This is just a continuation of the prior meeting, and so I would seek council's guidance on, for a public commenter from this afternoon being permitted an additional public comment period.
The information is the same, so the person already had their chance to comment.
Commenter 5288, if you're hearing me, this is a continuation of the earlier comment or the earlier discussion. You made public comment earlier. We're just giving people a second chance that didn't get public comment in. So, Kaylee, is there anybody else?
Nope, that's all, Chair.
Okay, anybody in the room for public comment that didn't already make public comment? Okay, closing the public comment. Any department heads want to make comment? No? Okay, I'll bring it back to my board for a motion or discussion.
I'll make the motion that reflects what the staff has outlined in front of us today.
I'll second.
Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Madrone?
Yes.
Supervisor Arroyo?
Yes.
Supervisor Bohn?
Okay.
Chair Bushnell?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
We're adjourned.